There we go. Hey, I know you're... Oh, whoa, fucking Christ. They like point blank shot me in the fucking face with a sniper. Oh shit.
15 minutes remaining.
Let's do that. Let's actually go like this quick. It's gonna kick me, but you guys don't mind your voices being heard at all, do you? Don't mind? Okay. It won't be very loud anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. There. Not many people are gonna watch it. It's easier than fucking recording and then just literally uploading gameplay, so I'll just stream it like fucking 4K, and yeah, it's not much, but I'm just playing some firefight because I didn't have any of the new Reach firefight when I streamed the first time, so.
Wait, Legacy, why are you over here?
I don't know, because things exist, and I was just... all our enemies are dead, I don't know, I was bored. They've been dead for a while. Shit, I don't have any ammo. Reload.
You guys got both phantoms? Oh, no, you didn't.
We literally had 2 enemies total. Fucking hate when... I hate the elite round, because literally nothing spawns. And when I say elite, I mean the elite soldiers kind of shit, I don't know.
You mean the heretics?
Yeah, whatever the fuck they are.
They're not heretics. Yeah, they are. They use human weapons. They're called heretics in the options.
I'm back. Where's the last enemy?
Dead?
Oh, there it is.
It's been dead.
What you guys doing? Firefight.
Shooting up. I mean...
We're almost done. We only got 4 waves left.
Alright.
Oh, that was
Yeah, our side's all dead, so... Can we have some kills, please?
We get the same amount as guys as you.
Why are you guys sucking so bad?
You get more. Because Yo-Yo doesn't want me to kill everything.
Tragdor over there with a fucking 11,000 points. Are you sure we have the most over here? Or the same?
I mean, we might have a slight amount of kills.
I'm just trying to catch up with a player over here. I shot you to get that kill. Is it just me, or is it holding A, making it so that if I just hold A, it'll jump better? Or use the jetpack, I mean.
I didn't realize it was this
Oh shit, where? I need a battery for this.
Oh look, you guys got the drop pod this time.
Yeah, with like nothing in it.
Ours only had 4 grunts. Dude, the fucking elites are way too fucking accurate.
I died because I plugged in my controller, or I unplugged my controller to put a battery in it instead. They also take a lot of ammo. Ooh, what am I doing? Jetpack, and I have 2 rocket launchers now. Okay. There we go.
That rocket launcher is better.
Well, I know. I like the fuel rod for clearing. It's just not as strong. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go.
Oh, enjoy both phantoms.
Oh shit! I blew myself up. No, I didn't. What?
We have two sword elite over here.
No, these are our side. Our side. Get away.
Yeah, get the
I'm
fuck
not
out
on
of
your
here.
side. That's bro. If bro goes over there, I'm not gonna be held responsible.
Oh, we saw that.
That's
Give me a
not
second.
me, that's bro.
Not me.
Sorry, I committed
Did
suicide.
die?
I needed to kill myself. I needed some gun. I needed a different gun. I accidentally changed my class on accident. So
Alright, counting down. You don't care about size no more.
size doesn't matter. Okay.
Sides don't count right now. There's no point in having sides.
Hey, go on your own side, bro. You got fun over there.
There's no more sides. The game's over. This is bonus.
I know it is.
We want the bonus. It's our bonus.
It's our bonus.
We want bonuses too.
We'll go work for him. Kidding.
Working for it. Can't you see I'm working very hard?
Oh, there's another guy here. I thought you died.
Kill him, Jar.
Okay, 9 seconds, guys. We can do this.
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton. Oh, fuck.
There's a drop pod.
Kill Bill
Last place. Woo. But hey, I'm in last place, but I also changed the diaper. I set up a stream. I put batteries in my controller, and I'm only a little bit behind both of you two.
But it's
Both
all
of you
over
two.
the fence.
What are you streaming on?
YouTube.
Oh, okay.
I stream on everything,
Hey,
but
YouTube,
YouTube works
people,
fine.
If you want to come check out another stream, come check out Flared Up on Mixer.
I don't think anyone heard you. I'm kidding. They did. And they see your name, too, so.
Well, I better start streaming then.
Aren't we backing out to pick up Giant?
I guess so.
Shit, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was doing the stream stuff. My bad, Giant.
Plasma fight?
Giant, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just sitting on
Alright.
the phone.
Sorry,
I am
man.
not
I
streaming.
reloaded into a lobby. I was trying to set up a stream.
Firefight. Dig in and defend the
Okay.
I'll back out.
But it's plasma fight.
Set, start, skull.
Why is my stream paused?
Oh, it just bounced off that. Jeez. It was locked on. Why didn't it?
Frogdor, why'd you quit?
Because we're picking up Giant.
Yeah.
Tree monkey.
How are we supposed to pick up a
User
fifth
can't
for
be
a
joined
firefight?
because you're only a follower.
What?
I mean, now that we have 5, we might do something else. So it just depends on what people
Wait,
want to do.
I couldn't join you because I'm not a follower.
Yeah.
What the fuck does that mean?
His privacy settings.
My Halo.
I'm
restarting my Halo.
It's nothing to do with restarting too, but it's a privacy
on a
thing.
black
I don't
screen.
know. Oh, weird.
I can still see all the options, but Bob has
But it's
36 candy
black?
bars. He eats 29. What does he
Yay!
have? Diabetes.
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 When I first got diagnosed with diabetes, I remember there wasn't nothing.
diabetes, don't you know?
We can do eight.
Does
player
anybody even
free-for-all
remember the
SWAT.
name of that medicine, or do we just remember diabetes?
The whole
Diabetes.
diabetes.
We can do 8-player free-for-all SWAT.
I'll be, in all honesty, the only reason I know the diabetes.
Just do the
joke
8
is
player
from
free-for-all
Drive-By
SWAT.
When they're talking about Cheeseburger the bear.
8-player free-for-all
You
SWAT
should
sounds
give
pretty
him
good right about
Cheeseburger,
now.
Then he got the beatus.
Trogdor, where you at, bro?
I had to restart my Halo. I'm coming.
Everybody
Get
should
on
include
it,
their
dude.
Everybody go to the
I
player
am.
and include their audios too for our streams, because Yo-Yo and I are also streaming.
I already included my voice. You guys can listen to my gorgeous laugh and shit.
Include my audio.
Alright, I'm here.
We got 5.
Touch
Alright,
me,
here we go.
senpai.
So we're doing
Did you say
8-player
touch me,
free-for-all
senpai?
SWAT.
'Cause that's all. Those are the magic words.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Prepare your ass.
Prepare
Here's the
thy
move, it's gonna get a
anus,
little rough.
peasant.
This is gonna be horrible.
You realize we're just gonna get swatting them over and over and over again, right?
Probably. Drop your socks.
What are we playing?
Grab your crotch. We're getting wet on this ride.
Free-for-all
Oh no,
SWAT.
regular SWAT. Awesome.
Not
I hate
free-for-all.
this map.
This is one of my favorite maps, actually. One of the best
Wait.
maps on Reach.
We're doing free for all?
Yep.
Free-for-all SWAT.
Oh fuck.
We're all gonna die.
I hate this fucking map. This map is cancer.
Why am I still streaming at
SWAT.
502 minutes on next?
I don't know.
Your Xbox is watching you sleep earlier.
I hit somebody in the head twice.
Yeah, that was me.
It didn't. How did that not do anything? It didn't even give you a give me a hit marker on my screen.
Ah, I just spawned. I didn't know what I was doing. Damn you,
Wow,
Yo-Yo.
you got so fucking lucky. Legacy.
I am good. It's fine. Just watch my stream, you'll see.
No! Trogdor, why?
Cause I'm an asshole.
Come on, show your face. Come back here.
Shit nuggets.
Fuck!
I just want to touch.
Fuck you.
Killing spree.
Fuck.
Tie the leader.
Damn it, player!
God
I was
damn it,
fucking
Trogdor.
itching my nose. I was itching my fucking
I
nose.
was wondering how I got that shot off before you.
Lost the lead.
No.
Had to fucking itch.
No!
How do you get negative points? Is that from killing yourself?
Yeah.
That's from falling off the ramp
Revenge.
like a dumb dick.
Well, good thing I don't have negative points.
Oh shit. Dude, you just fucking killed me, but I just spawned there, literally.
Fucking love it.
Shit
That
nuggets.
was stupid.
Everybody gang up on Trog. No, gang up on Yo-Yo. God damn you, Yo-Yo. Usually it's Trog that's kicking my ass.
I don't like free for all SWAT. I think it's fucking cancer.
Cancer's fun. Makes the game go quick. Oh, damn it.
It has the beatus.
Damn it, Yo-Yo. Wasn't expecting you to be right there.
Kill lock.
What the?
I'm trying to reset my stream.
Fucking salutes.
That should be
There
good.
we go.
Okay.
Alright.
Shit. Let me move that again.
Oh,
Out of the way.
Trogdor,
There we go.
how could you? Thought we were fam.
We are fam.
He
We're
just
about
wants
to
to
blow my
cuck you a
load
little
over your
bit.
inside, sister.
Fuck.
Is it too soon?
Damn it.
No,
It's
it's
not soon enough, I guess.
I have to hold my controller really weird right now because my daughter's like
Boom.
on my lap. Fucking sprawled out. Like one leg's off the right side, one leg's in the middle, and like her head's hanging off the side of me. I have no fucking idea what's going on.
I was just headshotted you twice.
I got close to your head a few times. God damn it, I just got double.
Fuck you, yo-yo.
Damn it. My aim was like, no. Oh, you had a fucking magnum on too. I forgot I had magnums.
I love my magnums.
Damn it. This Dennis person's actually
Picture my killing spree.
decent at times. No, I just got spawned.
Spawn there, yo-yo.
God damn it.
Damn it, yo-yo.
I keep getting assists.
That was my third spawn kill in a row.
Killjoy.
I finally died.
Game over.
There it is.
I have 1 kill.
God damn it. Tied for 4th now.
So Yo-Yo can play snipers and he can play SWAT. Slayer he's okay at.
As long as it's a one-hit kill. As long as it's a one-hit kill.
Yeah, if it's a one hit, he can do it. But if it's not one hit, he's like, oh, fuck that, I can't do it. We see your game, Yo-Yo. We see your game.
What are you talking about? I'm pro at everything.
3 new subscribers. Scrovergrum Doom, what? Mathis Rebelu Gowababa and Mr. Brian Show 316, huh?
25 and 5. Look at me go, boys.
You were camping a spawn location. You were literally.
I literally spawn killed everyone on the team at least 3 times.
Oh my god.
You didn't spawn kill me 3 times.
No, I didn't spawn kill you because
Anus.
I just didn't see you spawn.
That's why. Anus.
You got everybody else but me. I killed you a bunch.
Strogdor, how close are you to ranking up?
Let me check.
Well, man, how close are you to ranking?
I'm a 3rd. You guys do know you can see how much.
16.
You guys can see how much you need.
16,000.
It-
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you click
Without
on your name,
without doing that, you can just look at your name there. It shows the bar right underneath you. How much left you have.
I'd want
Yeah.
to know the exact
Oh,
amount.
Who cares?
I need 16,000. He asked me how much I needed.
Ah,
So about
So
2
how
games,
much-
2 games and I'm
Yeah.
how much does it go up every round?
Unless I play shit. I get roughly 8 to 10,000.
No, I mean how much does it go up? Is what I mean. Like after every level.
North
Wow.
Central U.S. That's
20 to
baby, I'm
40,000.
posting.
Yeah.
You know, for it being a season, it should just be 100,000 for every rank, just flat,
I think
Yeah.
and then just give us a little bit more or a little more per game.
SWAT.
Oh,
Yeah, the
I'm
whole
fucking-
having to get multi-million ones once you reach higher
Lost the
levels.
lead.
yeah, like I feel like it should literally be a flat amount of experience per, and then just do it that way. Especially since you have to go through 100 of them, and to reasonably do all that without actually sacrificing everything else you might want to play is bullshit.
camping.
Nope.
You're camping that corner hard. What you talking about?
I'm not camping. I'm not camping, you're camping.
Gain the lead.
I'd rather give Legacy the kill than you.
Why me?
Hey, one man, I'm coming up underneath you. Don't shoot.
Oh, player? There's another guy underneath me too. There he is.
Lost the lead.
Okay,
Fuck.
one man. Let's start going. Okay, one man, let's team up. One man, me.
Tied the lead.
Right behind you, by the way.
Lost the lead.
Damn it, I shot you.
One man above us, above us.
Killing spree.
he's sitting in here.
Son of a bitch, I just spawned.
Wow, that was cool. I just spawned and got
Tied the
assassinated.
lead.
Hello.
Oh my god.
Iron Giant, that is illegal.
Fuck, one man, do
I died, sorry. I think I'm having a latency issue. It's fucking annoying.
Lead.
Every time I see something, it's just like, no, I'm gonna teleport away. Or like I have like perfect bloom where I haven't shot at all, and I don't hit something.
What's up, leg?
Okay, I'm coming. Oh, you died, huh?
Finally.
How many shots you gonna shoot, Giant?
Gain the lead.
There was quite a few shots. That's all I'm
Motherfucker!
gonna say.
I just shoot one. If I don't think I'm gonna kill it, I just don't pull the trigger right now.
Well, I'm not a very good shot. I kind of shoot in the area around the head.
Legacy, is there
So-
something you want to tell me?
What?
One of them, though.
I just saw you, so I aimed in.
Just spawn killed
I actually just turned and looked over, saw you, aimed it, and shot. Like I didn't. I wasn't hard scoping that spot.
Fuck nuggets.
So I apologize if that was a spawn kill. Or
Oh man, that's me, don't shoot me.
I don't know who I'm looking at.
Over to you.
Oh, it's you. How
Alright,
you doing? We're about to die. Okay, I give us
that's what I'm calling
I give us 6 seconds. Yep.
Lost the lead.
He's up in the tower across from where we were originally.
Whatever. That was a headshot.
Revenge. Tied the leader.
Fucking
Lost the
fucking
lead.
Damn it. I saw that armor and I'm like, I had flashbacks to infected and needed to shoot you.
No.
Fuck you, Yo-Yo. Damn it. Giant fucking giant.
God damn it. He's going after another random and another fucking random double team me. Thank you so much, piece of shit randos.
Gain the lead.
Fuck nuggets. God damn it, Legacy.
Oh, one man.
Oh, that was you. Sorry, you're player. Player is the one that's over here not killing me. Okay. I just actually saw a person I aimed in and I shot.
Bye-bye. Fuck you, Yo-Yo.
Oh shit. When did you get there? Did you just spawn?
I've been
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, there you are. Fuck.
That was kind of
I know. I like spawned and I like instantly was like, shit, I'm in his line of sight. I need to shoot him.
Damn it, I was gonna shoot you. I saw you. I saw the red. I'm looking for that red.
Shit. You remember me being red all the time. Now you're like, fuck, I need to kill him.
Lost the lead.
Okay, what do we got here? We got this guy being a random. Then we got this person over here.
God damn it, truck.
Oh, that's player. Shit.
Long
One
time.
man.
I need to remember you're red too.
I'm
not red, I'm
mostly
white.
gray and a little bit red.
Oh shit. God damn it. There's
There's
another.
You and one of the randoms is only red ones in here. Okay, I'm back up in our tower. No! What? I
God
almost
damn it,
beat you.
truck. I just
Poor
spawned.
giant. Damn it.
I fucking hate you guys. You guys are the worst fucking
I
spawn
feel
killers
so
in my
bad
life.
because I just spawn killed giant so many fucking times.
I was trying to kill Giant. Damn it, Yo-Yo.
I feel so bad.
I like don't know where any of the spawns.
Smack.
Giant literally has done nothing wrong and we're all going.
No, I just saw someone to shoot.
Oh, you're telling me I'm the only one with fucking 5 kills.
No.
No,
Bad
I had
senpai.
giant. I had giant.
I thought you said head Gina, and I'm like, what?
Bullshit, Flashpoint. I fucking
Ah, fuck. God damn it.
I tried trying to call it out.
I literally just see a person, I aim in, and I shoot. Hey, oh,
That happens more often than I care to count. Trog, we'll just punch each other and die right next to each other.
I'm the wiener.
Again, only can
I
win
got
games
double
where you can
digits.
one-shot.
damn it, flashpoint.
I'm the wiener.
You're a wiener?
I'm the
I'm the only one
wiener.
who got. I'm the only one who got 5 kills because I kept just trying to find legacy the entire time. And by the way, Yo-Yo, you are the worst fucker at spawn camping.
Okay, 4th place can get 8,000, so.
I got 1,000.
I got 12,000 from that game.
I wonder if they know we're a squad.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't think it really matters.
I mean, we're all going up against each other anyways, but...
Oh, it's the same dudes. Nope.
No, no, we did play
Andre,
Andre
dude.
before.
Oh my god. This Andre dude fucking blows.
Yeah, we were playing with Andre on the Halo 2 map.
Yup.
Yeah, we were. He's not that good. He's trash.
Yeah. And we just played with Kid Devo.
He's also trash.
SWAT.
He assassinated me quite a few times.
I'm gonna suck this game. This is gonna be me signing off.
Lost the
God
lead.
damn it. Fucking 2 people.
Damn it!
right away.
My daughter just made me reload. She pressed my fucking button. Ah, I was trying to kill.
Press your button, huh?
No way. What?
Okay, I'm sorry. That was...
Legacy, I'm coming to find you.
Oh, she got down.
Somebody just touched me inappropriately, and I don't appreciate it.
Here, you can have the blanket, Kyrie.
I was gonna save you, Yo-Yo, but...
Right in the head. Just stab.
Revenge.
Wow, spawn killed. That's cool.
This is Sparta!
One man.
Damn it.
Bam.
I'm being cucked so hard right now.
You enjoy
Everyone. It's just collectively cucking me.
it. Dang it.
Thank you,
Either
whoever killed
Trog
this
or
Trog
Wicked
door.
just took my kill. Shit.
Damn it. The tractor got me.
Fuck, Trogdor.
Yeet.
Damn it, there's 2 of them. 2 people fucking behind me.
Did you record it? Put it on Xtube?
Oh, you know it, Daddy. Wow. Yo-Yo, camping
Oh, wait,
much?
one man.
Okay.
Oh, one man, no.
Yeet. Aw, man, you can't go up here?
No!
That's gay.
Triple team.
Kill.
I got triple kill. Overkill. Here we go, overkill.
One man.
Oh, damn. Damn it, I died.
Lost the lead.
I died.
What?
I saw that and I'm like, dude, perfect. Dude, what was that aim, Yo-Yo?
I got fucking yoinked too, so no. If I can't have an
No,
assassination,
no.
nobody can.
You asshole!
I tried
He,
to
like,
save you,
stomped me
Giant.
to
I
the
tried
ground
to stop
once.
it.
Just that stomp and snap.
Tie the leader.
Oh, close.
Lost the lead.
Pistol for the win. Ah, shit.
Oh, shit.
God damn it,
Shit,
Shark Boy.
tacky.
Oh, that's player.
Tie the leader.
Thought that was Trogdor for some reason.
Lost the lead.
Damn
We
it.
had- I
it,
thought we were
Trogdor.
teammates.
lobby.
Hey, think about it. I literally don't see your name before I pull the trigger. That's just my reflex.
That's why you gotta recognize.
I am literally not even, like, everything looks like one color to me because they're dead in my eyes. Like, I'm not, the hesitation to not shoot you is kind of,
God damn it.
Why is Andre
sorry
always
about that, player.
That's creepy.
I'm-
That ass.
There's another guy with the same armor as you, for them looks like, so
Yeah.
I keep on, like, going to
God
kill.
damn it. Player, did you just spawn? Be honest
No,
with
I took the grapple.
Revenge.
me. Okay.
Damn it!
Just making sure.
I love how I was literally tied with the leader and now I'm stuck last.
Shit.
God damn it, you hoe.
God damn it!
I was
look at Mama.
chasing
So I got shot
so long.
I
through.
know you were. I heard you fucking shoot.
Damn it.
It always tells me because not many people are using the pistol.
Thanks.
Oh, one man, you literally just spawned.
Oh, really?
Just
Oh,
died. Yeah.
Motherfucker.
Oh, hey, player.
Speed! Ah, run!
Son of a slut.
No!
Oh, fucker. My aim was a little off. Shot just above Tragdor's head.
I was trying to kill Andre and then somebody shot me.
What this bullshit? I hit you!
I know you did. I know you did.
Bullshit!
My hacks kicked in. Player is
Hello,
so
yo.
big. Hey player, you mad, bro?
Not really. Damn it.
Damn
That
it,
was
player.
Legacy.
Or not player,
That was
legacy. Yeah. My bad. I'm going after legacy. Legacy I can't fucking talk.
Game
I'm sorry.
God damn it.
I can't win everyone.
Rape.
It's not rape if you yell surprise.
Jesus Christ.
Oh wait, you guys got that in your stream. Whoops.
Yeah. I just lost
And-
3 viewers, and they were my only 3 viewers.
Wait, you
You
had
deserve-
3 viewers?
You don't
Yeah.
deserve viewers. Oh look, I'm a
I
brigadier
have 0
general.
viewers.
That means I
Whoever's
suck,
viewing
right?
One Man Legacy, come
Yup.
join my stream too.
Oh my god, he's a brigadier general. He blows.
That means I suck. But it actually looks really cool. I love that emblem. I think that
It
looks
does
sick.
look cool.
But that means I'm trash.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
fucking trash, guys. Let's see how much I need to rank up. Well, okay, guesses before I check it.
221,000.
Okay, I'm gonna guess about
120,000.
I'm gonna guess 220. Okay, so I am at 1.47. I need to get 1.61. So yeah, about 440,000. Or yeah,
No,
That's 240,000.
1.47 to 162.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's 15. That's 150. 150,000.
Yeah. Fuck, dude. I need to get
So I was
15
close.
games.
I said 120,000.
That was pretty close. I said 220, so.
Yeah, I don't know who said like 250 or 400.
I mean, I wouldn't mind if it was 100,000 points per rank.
That
Flat.
means I just got a. That means I just got a new fucking rank up.
Firefight.
I didn't get to see what it was.
All right, so one man, we're going right here in the picture, okay? That's where we're sitting.
Okay, good to know, guys. Hey, make sure you don't go where the picture's showing. Just saying that now because he's going there.
Who, me?
Or we can all team up on the randoms right now.
SWAT.
How about we don't say we did?
Yeah, fuck you too.
Damn it.
Lost the lead.
I got first strike.
Yeah, you just teamed up on me, both of you.
Fuck you, Yo-Yo.
Whatever, you were the first
Okay,
one.
one of the randoms literally jumping up and down. You know, in the same spot. He's like not moving and jumping up and down. Oh, never mind. He's playing now.
God damn it, I got fucking assassinated.
I was really about to say hi, one man, as I was looking right at you, and then you died.
Whoever just killed him,
No!
fucking saved me.
I knew you were still sitting around.
Oh, there he is.
No, Trogdor, stop cucking me.
Fuck you, this is my spot now.
Untitled Captain now.
One man, I'm
Oh,
coming.
fuck. I was trying to take out...
God damn it, I can't see anyone, and then as soon as I move, it's like T-Rex. They can't move you. If you don't move, they can't see you.
Can't move. I got a big head and little arms. Literally everybody I've seen is really shot.
Damn it, I finally died.
And
Legacy,
No.
did you just spawn?
Legacy, where are you?
Wow, I just fucking spawned, yo. Fuck you.
Legacy, I'm right.
Oh. You're lucky I missed twice. No, I didn't. I killed Tractor in one shot. Just kind of whipped around and shot him. And then the other guy that's...
I just saved you,
That's
Legacy.
cool.
Yeah, I know. I saved you, Legacy. You're welcome.
Yo, SWAT.
Oh shit,
Legacy,
there's
you'll get a freebie.
Never mind. You'll end up getting it anyway. You and Yo-Yo kill me the most anyway, so...
No! Fuck you, Yo-Yo! I was about to go get hired. I was about to assassinate him.
Don't worry guys, just turning on the modded controller. We're gonna make this good. Oh shit.
Thanks.
Yeah, I
Appreciate the freebie.
forgot to look up there, because that's where you've been. I don't know why I didn't look.
Shit nuggets.
Like,
Damn it, I saw you, I saw the red, and I was like, I'm gonna get him, and then it's like, nope, I was jumping.
I've really only killed like Iron Giants this entire game. Fuck
Is
you,
it
Trogdor.
easy to identify my
Hi, player, how you
colors,
doing?
or not really?
Hi, how are you?
Long time no see.
How easy is it
Legacy,
to
I just-
identify
I did too. Leave me alone.
You owe me a freebie.
Iron just fucking spawned there and assassinates me.
Hi.
What? It's like there's no crime in baseball.
Oh, I just came around the corner and you were just there. I'm just like, oh, hi. How are you? Oh, bad Trog.
You said no one used the pistol. I had to use the pistol.
Hello, Lego.
Lego my Eggo?
James,
Wow.
Now I'm on waffles.
Damn it, Legacy!
Oh, that was you.
Bitch!
Legacy, if you look up right where you killed Trog again, because this is me right here, and I was about to do the exact same thing to him.
Wait, how did
Shit.
I get a double kill?
Wow, Yo-Yo.
Who's the
Came
second
in that
person I
hallway, huh?
killed?
Yo-Yo's in the hallway.
Wow, Sherlock keeps fucking cucking me.
Oh, Iron.
Hi.
Where? You're always behind me with a knife. I looked down both of those hallways, didn't see anything.
One man, hi, one man.
Hi, I don't know.
Hi, one man,
No.
don't shoot me.
No! I must have been weak, because
Oh,
I
wait,
don't know
one
how
man,
Damn it.
or you died and I
Where's-
didn't.
Don't shoot, don't shoot.
I'm
Yo-Yo, if one man didn't kill you right there, I was right behind you to assassinate you, so... You're lucky that he shot you.
Hey. Miss me with that
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Damn it.
I have like no health.
Oh, that was you.
That was my headshot,
God damn it.
dog.
You're the only one killing me, I swear to God.
I like to punch your face.
You've been stabbing me in the neck.
Well, I mean,
I
that's
have, like, I'm literally 3-barring it over here. Like, God damn it.
point. I like to caress your facial features.
Fuck off, player.
Forcefully.
I'm gonna die now, Trog.
Good.
Dang
Get
it,
it.
I
Oh,
almost
damn
got
it.
you.
I didn't look again. Trapdoor.
Ah!
No! Fuck you, Sherlock. I was about to kill Trog again. I literally had you in my sight. No!
How's it
Dang
going?
it, I
Get
almost
fucking
hit
turned
you in
on.
the head.
Fucking Snyder shot me.
Hey, Trapdoor, guess what? Never mind.
What?
Accept my love.
Said never mind.
Never mind. You walked up a tunnel. I didn't have a view of you anymore. Now you had a shot of me.
Game over.
I was trying to kill the random.
Yeah, I know.
Damn it,
Okay.
Trogdor. Let me win. I want to win.
Me and Player killed me so many times in a fucking row, dude.
I just kept
Yeah,
assassinating
Iron
you
was
over
behind
and
me
over.
every time I had a good lead. Or not a good lead. Every time I was like on a couple streaks here.
I'm
was
just
so pissed.
Yeah.
Just behind you.
Assassination. Giant.
Giant was just always behind me every time I went on a streak.
Woo! Second lieutenant.
You need to
Yeah,
find a better way to word that.
He was just giving me the good old reach around, and it was just not okay.
Wow, this is the first game that not all of us
Yeah.
are in the lead. Poor Player at the bottom there.
Trogdor,
I got
you
my
gotta quit
assassination
playing
taken
for
away
like
from me like
6
5
hours.
times
Let me
that
catch
game.
up.
I already took a
literally
10-hour
had 5
nap.
assassinations
I went to
and
bed
they were
for
all
10
taken away
hours.
from me.
You're gonna catch me. You're gonna catch up tomorrow when I go to work anyway. So don't worry about it.
Nah, I gotta go to work tomorrow too, so I guess we gotta give everyone else a chance to catch up.
Yeah, I'll
well, hey,
finally be able to
I'm
catch up a
finally in
bit.
the blue squad, okay?
I finally have a new fucking chess piece. Again, I have the counter assault for hitting Brigadier General.
What I want
I'm finally in the blue
is-
squad.
Congrats.
What I need a couple different pieces of shoulder armor so I can mix and match them a bit.
I'm in the true blue squad. I'm above Yo-Yo. I'm just
I either
above
want
that caliber of
Commando
player.
or Emil's shoulder
I want my-
pieces.
I want my Gunganier. I want my Gunganier. That's all I want.
The ODST shoulder armor ain't bad either.
Yeah, ODST shoulder armor sleek. I like
I want
that
my Gunganier with Jun's chest piece.
I always try to make my character look like a walking tank.
Same
Kind of
that's
like
exactly
a
what
smaller,
I do too.
just a smaller version of George.
That's exactly what I do. Because all my armor I use in the Overwatch is all
SWAT.
Grenadier armor.
Alright, so everybody's gonna gain up on Player, right? Because he's totally the best.
Totally.
I'm just gonna touch you. I don't know what.
I just fell backwards into there, and you still... I walked backwards.
What the hell
There's
just
a guy
happened?
who's literally just going up and punching people. Just heads up, be careful.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Lost the lead.
Try.
Fuck you, Charger. Fuck you, Charger.
Double kill. Gain the lead.
How did you not kill me?
I don't know.
Triple kill.
Someone's sitting in
Killing
the fucking
spree.
teleporter up on top. Just heads
Oh,
up.
I see the player, you hoe.
Damn
He's
it.
dead.
Fuck.
Come on! How I was trying to kill fucking.
You ended my spree. Always. It's always you.
Yeah, I don't know why. I always seem to be the one that.
You
finds
just
it
always
whenever you're on
come up
screen.
upon me and then I'm not looking.
I hate this fucking map. This map
Shit
is
on your
fucking
day.
cancer.
I mean, it kinda is. Oh god.
No, it's not kinda. It is. This map is legit.
Hey Giant, guess what?
What?
I did too. We spawned next to each other.
What's up, Daddy? What's up?
Singular torsion.
No. You didn't see me.
Motherfucker stuck in.
It didn't give me credit for that kill.
Stop fucking camping, camper. Stop camping, player.
I
Stop
knew you were gonna
camping.
see me up there. I was gonna
Of
try
course
to-
I'm gonna be checking it every fucking time now because I know you camp up there.
Hello. Hi.
Ah, fuck you. No, fuck you. Don't you shoot me.
Double kill.
Ah,
Killing spree.
Aw, damn it. That should have been a triple.
Wow, Legos. Thank you.
Aw.
Fuck you, Legos.
This has been my best fucking game so far.
I'm playing
Oh,
like
One
shit,
sec.
one minute.
Revenge.
I'm playing like absolute shit.
Like I said, I hate this map. It's fucking cancer. This map is
I
fucking
know, but you can't hide behind me forever. Kidding.
You can just get. It's just.
Yeah, this map is also spawn kill fucking hell. Tell you that much. I can only imagine because I had a steady stream of kills all from the same spot. So
It stopped telling.
oh wait, yeah, and like never does that for me anymore.
Yes, I did.
Bad.
No, fuck. Yo, you couldn't have killed him a second sooner.
So we were talking about being able to identify each other by our armors. Can you easily?
Yeah, you're a little greenish
Kinda.
in comparison to some. And you have the military police helmet, maybe?
His armor memorized.
Oh wow, good guess for me.
Yes.
It looks like it is.
Changed it. I was wearing it.
I've already memorized everybody's armor.
God damn it.
That's how-
I had to go for Giant, and then I didn't even kill him.
Hello.
I was
Wait, wait,
teabagging the
don't
guy
do
who
it.
kept
No.
fucking punching in melee.
Oh damn it.
The only time my melee is when I'm trying to.
My aim
assassinate
is just
people.
not.
Player. Stop. I accused you right there twice in a row now. One there behind you.
Never kept fucking going through that teleporter with me. I fucking love you.
That wasn't me, but I was thinking it was you,
Double kill.
Legacy, I'm going to.
Okay, hey, what? Wait, was that that was Yo-Yo, right? I just spawned. Don't mind me.
Shit.
I'm no threat.
I'm so tempted to give Legacy the win. Legacy,
Because
why
of
don't
it?
you kill me? I want this map.
I just got it on Yo-Yo. It's fine.
Thank you. I'm okay with that.
Oh, you
Just
tried.
get
I
me the
didn't
fuck
know
out
That
of
was
here.
actually a pretty decent game.
I'm fucking done.
Oh, I know, but
I hate that fucking map.
That
No,
map
hey,
sucks
alright,
ass.
so you know what it is? I think I know what it is. Legacy's armor is red and it fucks with me because I think I don't know what it is. I can headshot everyone else. Like no
So
fucking
everybody
problem.
change your. So everybody change.
first
your
color
armor.
red, second color.
That's what he
Everyone first color red, second color black, and let's see what he does. Because that's what mine is at the moment.
I always go for iron color, I guess.
I want a 6 kill spree. Wow, that's pretty good. I had 34 medals. 29 was the second most medals.
What
So we're
color
doing-
red?
Yeah.
Maroon?
Maroon.
Yo, you and me had an average life of 17 seconds, along with Iron somehow. How did Iron have it? What?
I had 13.
Player had more than... The player had the same amount as you. No, you had 12-second tractor.
I know I did.
Oh no, you weren't the
That
one who
was just
talked.
fucking
That was
cancer.
player. I saw your name on my screen.
Okay,
I
don't
know,
even
my name
what
is
colors
just
they are
amazing.
anymore.
Oh yay, more cancer. Give me a fucking Forge World map.
I don't think there is a Forge World map on SWAT in this.
So dumb.
Uncage used to be.
Every fucking time it pulls up the start menu every time we start a game.
SWAT.
Okay.
Alright, well man, I look like you now. I have your
You
color
pretty
now.
much look like me to begin with.
Lost the
Wow,
lead.
that was cool.
Damn it. Oh god damn it. There was 3 people on that side looking all at the same place. Oh, and Yo-Yo's gonna be camping his same old spawn point. Right? Right?
Tied the leader.
Oh damn it. Did
Lost
Yo-Yo
the
kill me?
lead.
Fuck!
Hi, player.
I just hear everybody dying around me. and
Double
I've only
kill.
seen one
Tied
person
the
so
leader.
far, and he died before I could shoot him.
Fuck you, Yo-Yo. No, fuck
Damn
you,
it, I
Yo-Yo.
missed Trog.
I hit you like
Fuck you,
4 times, Yo-Yo.
Trog.
How'd you not die?
Lost the lead.
No.
Death to Trog.
Damn.
Oh, you got. Ah,
Tied
fuck!
the
You got the
leader.
kill. I missed the
Damn it.
fucking thing.
One man, I'm coming to you.
And then Iron fucking died behind him, melee attacking.
Lost the lead.
I know, I saw.
Assassinate him. I needed to touch somebody's fleshy bit. Yoink!
Everybody changed their armor now, so I don't recognize who's who.
I think my armor still
Damn it.
is somewhat the same.
I actually haven't seen a few of you this entire game.
Fuck you,
I was
Trog,
stuck in midair.
Fuck you, Giants. I saw you getting on the other side of that fucking rear wall, window, whatever. That was fucking crafty
like,
as fuck.
Damn it, died.
Oh, I almost got need eggs as well.
Revenge.
We need more zero grab maps. I have a lot of fun with those.
Comes up and fucking breaks my neck.
I almost shot him in the head after he did that too.
Damn it.
Yo-Yo was about to kill
Hi,
us.
Iron.
I killed you, and then Yo-Yo.
Fuck you.
Oh fuck.
Hi, eggs.
Just like, hello friend.
Hello, my
I see
friend.
You're very acquainted with my fists. And my knife. I named my knife
I'm on a killing
Steve.
frenzy right now. This is fucking
Die,
amazing.
eggs.
Got giant.
I still got the kill.
I got the power.
Oh no, 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 don't fall off the
Yo-Yo,
map.
my killing frenzy. What the fuck, asshat?
Wee.
Wow, I just got spawn raped hard.
Hi. They still
Hi.
work.
They do for
You're
Trog,
just
right?
shooting at me, trying to break the glass, and I'm just standing there like, hi.
Howdy ho! Howdy ho! I'm Hanky.
Blair, you son of a bitch, I hope you die. Thank
I
you.
shot him. Just boink. Ask and
Whoever-
you shall receive.
Fuck him.
I want enlightenment
No.
and $1 million.
Go back to start.
Bitch.
I mean, you said ask and I shall receive. Do I not get what I asked for? You fucking lying cock.
Dude just went right past you, player. I got double teamed from right there. No! You shall not touch me! Too busy floating. Dang it. Oh, my body just fell off the map. And
God
I'm
bless
just
it, I
watching
saw
it
it.
go into orbit.
I've gotten a kill in like the last 2 minutes.
Oh, you're.
Damn you,
man.
yo-yo.
Oh,
Don't shoot me,
sorry.
don't shoot me.
Wait, where the fuck did I just die from?
Me.
Oh, I see.
I'm
you.
everywhere.
Spree.
Damn it.
I have to look everywhere while running around this map. Like, I can't look.
Gotcha. Might have to turn my sensitivity up.
Chongdar behind you.
Like, I can't do this. Like, I'm literally having to do almost entire 360s just to. Oh, damn it!
Fuck you, Charger.
Hi, player.
You guys, you're letting a random be in second place. Come on. Well, he wasn't until he got that last kill.
Fuck, yo-yo. Yo-yo, you suck.
Damn it!
No,
I almost did the same thing, but you're fine. I just.
Damn it, I just spawned in a TSS
I feel like it's an
buddy
unspoken
guy.
No.
player. What is with you camping, player? Every time I see you.
Game over.
You literally fight me 5 seconds after I spawn
Fuck,
every
Chongdar.
time. I literally never camp it. You just find me that quickly.
I had a killing frenzy that game. That was fucking awesome. I literally had the center locked down. No one could fucking get me. I still feel bad that I fucking killed Legacy with a melee. Ugh. I panicked though, because I was going from eggs, because I saw eggs and I didn't see him die, and I was like, oh fuck.
Kyrie?
Average life that time, 25 seconds. What's up? I'm the only one to break 20.
I was in last place with 11, kind of a giant.
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of sucked that game, especially since my one prior was better.
Oh, God.
Oh, I actually had 3 triple kills, I believe, that game. What, Kyrie? Fries? We don't have any fries.
So we have a
Got chicken.
So, don't worry guys, the recruit is better than the brigadier general. We'll be fine.
Thankfully this is more flat. This shouldn't be bad.
Actually, I don't know. I haven't...
Okay, is it just me or does everybody in this game have such a Halo name? Like, I feel like playing Halo 3 and this is the type of names you'd see.
I don't have a Halo, ma'am.
Me.
I don't have a Halo name.
Your name is the
Rada and Picada.
Trogdor. I don't know.
Was a dragon, or was he a man? But he was a dragon.
Eventually, I'm going to change my name because this is the name I first.
So
got
you're gonna be
when I
Noob
had
Slayer
done
69?
SWAT.
Mine was Nat401.
Same name of player dude for 14 years. For Xbox alone. I've had it on another account for a lot longer.
First strike. Gain the lead.
Damn it. Killed the fucking emos.
Damn it!
I got the assist.
I was about to kill you, Frog.
I know you were.
I had you dead to right.
Damn it.
Apparently not.
Yeah, and Rada and Picada.
Lost the lead.
Damn it! I just spawned.
Fuck you, yo.
But you killed each other at the same time. That was great.
Double kill.
Revenge.
Damn you,
Tied the
Trog.
leader. Double kill.
Giant
Gain the
kill.
lead.
No, I'm getting all the double kills. Don't mind me.
Double kill.
If I see something, I'm killing it.
If I could get one kill, that'd be nice.
One man.
I'll have to get back up there and kill him now, huh?
No, fuck you, Drago.
We got another.
Killing spree.
Thank God.
Gain the lead.
We need less randoms.
Damn it! You sons of bitches, leave me
Shit,
alone.
you're behind. You had to put me on my fucking spree. You had to kill my...
The lead.
Yes, I did.
Oh, I'm on the wrong roof.
Oh, player, you got so fucking lucky.
I was like,
Oh, got
I was expecting player to be up there. A random got me.
Hey, Yo-Yo, I saw you at the right, baby.
What?
fucking zombies.
Isn't there one hit melee in this?
I
No.
just punched 3 people in a row.
Wow, I just got fucked.
Oh, hey guys. There's a doll in here. I found a doll.
Fuck you.
Look at this. What the fuck is...
Oh, where is it? There's actually an achievement. for
It's
dolls.
spawn room. Spawn room on the east side.
Fucking tryhard.
East side spawn room.
Fuck you, zombies. You
East
fucking-
side teleporter room.
Sides.
Just east side. Just go to the east side. I don't know what the fuck.
Trying to get there, but people are trying to kill me. Damn you, truck! I'm trying to get to the
'Kay.
east side
If you-
teleporter.
I'm going to avoid it now.
I'm just trying to get kills.
Okay. Things aren't displaying on my screen anymore. I just got a double kill headshot, and it's just like... Oh, there it goes.
Stop it! I'm trying to
Fuck you,
get to my
Drago.
spot.
Fucking Tragdor.
Hey,
I'm in
teleporter
the
set.
teleporter room. Don't kill me.
Okay, I'm coming in right here now, too. Alright,
What is that?
I'm here.
Oh, that's the helmet.
Oh my
it's
God.
wearing? That's the helmet that's in the
Hey guys,
vial.
Melee it.
Melee it.
It squeaks.
Oh my God, it's there.
Damn it. I was gonna... I wanted to melee the thing.
No.
Okay, don't...
Yeah, but okay, you see the helmet that's on it?
I'm coming in to melee it.
The helmet is actually the helmet that's in the game file. But
It's in the game files, but it's not in the game.
yeah, people have been wanting it for so long.
They said they
but it's
might
never
add
been
it in
added.
for the season passes.
They should. I would totally use it.
One helmet?
I would grind to wear that.
Damn it.
Okay, I'm just.
I was
just
gonna
wanna kinda
assassinate Legacy, but
just
it
so
would
I
not
can
let me.
get haunted.
I was hoping I'd get an achievement for that doll, but that sucks.
There are toys hidden in different maps. I think
Oh.
there might be campaign maps.
Bullshit.
And yeah.
Is it just me, or do you guys see fucking Caboose sitting on a ledge with a flag, trying to get red versus... No.
Where?
No, I'm saying in my head I'm seeing that fucking episode where he's trying to convince them to stop fighting.
Fuck you, fuck you. Fuck you.
Oh, damn it. Triple kill, there we go. Okay, can I get another?
I gotta do
Damn it, I only got 2, and then Rada got me. Fuck.
Congrats.
It was at the last possible second because they were bolting out of the teleporter. And you snag him across the face.
What? Fuck? How did I get you? Oh, damn it. Everyone's getting killed by Yo-Yo, I guess.
No. Wait. Damn it. I thought I got the kill on you, truck. Yeah, I did not.
Me and Yo-Yo are different colors.
I know. They fuck me Trogdor, that it's a unit first, but it's Yo-Yo.
Killing spree.
I hate you, Trogdor. I hate you.
Oh, damn it.
Game
Oh, that was... I keep forgetting you changed to yellow, or changed to red.
I'm the leader. I'm the leader.
Oh, hey, we got Marksman in here. We should invite him. Back out and invite him.
Yep, I'm backing out to pick him up.
Nobody right now,
How many
'cause
viewers do you
everyone's watching fucking. There's huge streamers streaming fucking. Whatever this game is. Reach again.
Oh yeah, what's his face? Ninja is doing the content
Yeah.
creators challenge thing.
Yeah.
It's a
Wasn't that
private
yesterday?
chat.
Oh, okay. I thought that was supposed to be on the 4th. But I guess it's the 5th now, but.
Alright, let's back out.
Well, maybe they're not doing it today. I don't know. I haven't
Rip.
been on Mixer all day.
I'm streaming on Mixer.
In fact, I haven't even touched my phone all day. It's just been sitting in the room charging.
Oh, look.
I don't know.
Alright, so what are we doing?
The
Now
same
there's
thing?
6 of us.
Same thing.
Same thing?
Oh.
Give me 1 sec. My girlfriend might play.
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna go use the bathroom.
If she's looking for mature teammates, she's
Yeah.
looking in the wrong place. I'm like the opposite of mature. I need an adult. You are an adult. I need a bigger adult.
Go on to some Twitter. Okay, what's going on?
I wanna be the very best.
Oh, by the way, fair warning. My girlfriend has only played through campaign on normal and played like a handful of multiplayer games.
I mean,
Don't
don't
worry,
worry.
I suck.
We're playing with a Brigadier General. He's trash. What is a dinosaur's least favorite reindeer? Comet.
Alright, so are you ready?
Fuck y'all.
Yo-Yo and Trondor and one man.
Okay, so I was just tweeting out some things. YouTube Rewind just came out today, I guess.
Alright, I'm back.
No, just start it.
Ready?
When I say no, I'm kidding.
Well, I can't search anyways because Yo-Yo is still.
He's a yerpy. Yerp von Yerpenstein.
Let's start it up.
Okay, Yorkie. You gotta move your controller fingers. Wiggle, 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 yeah. Wiggle, 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 yeah.
Alright, is everybody ready?
If you press X, it'll tell you whether someone's sleeping. No one's sleeping. You can just start it. You're good. You know, they should just make it so you can fucking level up in every game mode in the game. And then people can go and do what makes them have fun. I mean, it'll definitely scale with what's going on, obviously. But, I mean, going out and playing like some really fucking awesome custom games would definitely warrant, I mean, let's say like a very long session of something. That should warrant at least a little bit of something here and there. That's why I like the credit system so much. That was
Who's Ladybird?
That's Marksman's girlfriend. Or wife.
Ah!
Is she joining the party or no?
She doesn't deserve the party.
My headset is like, fucked up, so I'm using hers. But I have my party chat going through my TV, so she can hear y'all.
Rob Stark's ghost.
I'm just saying Hitler did nothing
What?
wrong. Exactly. I
know
mean,
what
it was all
lolly
their.
is.
A
SWAT.
lolly is a
The
small
Nazis
little
aren't
girl.
so bad.
Just someone who appears younger. I don't know. You're trying to say you're.
It is
Lost
someone who
the
appears younger.
lead.
I was trying to make make you sound
Fuck you,
really
Jordan!
bad.
No, fuck you! Yo-Yo just destroyed a
Fuck.
boat.
No.
That makes you feel.
Damn it. I stopped shooting. I don't know why.
I feel so bad because I panic melee every fucking time.
When I say Nazi, you say party. Nazi.
Party!
Nazi.
Party!
I thought you meleeed at first. I saw you. I was like, wait.
Double kill.
They get in
Tie the
and
leader.
then showdown,
Lost
drop
the lead. Tie the leader.
I'm just looking for something.
Damn it, I almost got. Oh, that was you behind me. I thought someone else across the map was you, Tractor.
Lost the lead.
Fuck you, Trogdor.
Damn it.
Shot me.
Fuck did I do?
Him. Everybody.
It's just you.
Wow.
Yeah!
Just fire if you shoot me. Trust me. It's better for you. Who knows, you might kill me.
Marksman, I'm gonna try not to assassinate your wife whenever I come up from behind her, just out of courtesy.
Oh my god!
Damn you, Yo-Yo.
What are you talking about, player? You don't want to stab some other girl?
You know, it's just out of common courtesy.
Don't stab your friends' girls.
Yeah. Let's go with that.
Shit.
Stab it. I'm gonna do it. Don't you do it.
Come here, Yo-Yo. Shit.
Nope!
Fuck you, giant.
Can't catch
No, I just want to shoot Yo-Yo in the face.
Last time you killed me in the exact same spot. Coming from the exact same direction.
Yeah?
Fuck. Why is it always you?
Yeah.
Double kill.
Because I'm fucking everywhere.
Oh, Jesus, I need to shoot you.
Problem.
What are you doing up there?
Damn it!
I'm trying to fly, okay?
Hi, giant.
I thought
How
I
you
could
doing?
learn to
That wasn't me trying to.
Dude, the fucking
Yeah.
bloom on this is
Hi,
if there
Yo-Yo.
was no bloom on it, you would have died already.
If there was no bloom, it would have been a BR and you would have died too.
Can we
I saw
play a
Ladybird,
round
but
where
then I
we
missed.
don't
I
pick
lost
on
track
Yo-Yo?
of her.
This was the BR.
Lost the lead.
I saw a lady and then she ran away and then I
Shit.
lost track of her.
Hey guys, I have a fun game we can all play. Pick on
I'm just
Yo-Yo.
shooting whatever I see. Not my fault.
Best game.
Plus,
I see
you're
Yo-Yo
kind of
and
just a
Alex.
red target, so
Tie the leader.
you got to use the darker red.
Lost the lead.
I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of us are red targets.
Hi,
Shit!
giant.
Shrug, no!
Damn it.
Rob Stark's ghost is hiding all the way in the front.
We gotta not be as sweaty.
I'm not trying to. I'm just shooting what I see.
I don't know what you want me to do.
Fuck! I almost assassinated you, but you turned at the last second.
Trogdor, you were just
Oh,
about to
shit.
shoot her, but-
Don't kill lady. If you see a gray person, don't shoot it.
Oh no, my killing frenzy.
Oh god.
They're the
Shoot.
same color as
Shoot.
lady.
You can't control the random.
Oh god damn it.
I feel like you
I did it again.
can't-
You want? What do you want? The little TV?
What time is it?
I want to be the little spoon.
I'll feed her after this.
I had to wait for you to turn around so I could get a better headshot.
Somebody
Can I
just
be
tried
the
to
little
touch
spoon?
me, and I'm not.
I got spawn killed by Yo-Yo. Why are you always right in that little spot whenever I see you, Yo?
Hey, who third party?
Damn it.
Revenge.
You want the box, Kyrie?
Whoever just killed that son of
It's on the floor. It's empty. Play with an empty box.
Have a fight with a lady, and then
Hey guys, look, there's advertisement for Reach over here, or for Destiny over here. Look at that. It's the Traveler. Didn't you know that?
No way.
This poster here is for Reach, or for Destiny, inside the building on the southeast side. It's the one. It's the yellow poster with the yellow, or it's a yellow. It's a yellow poster with black circles on it. It's their subtle. It's a portion of No, they've even came out and said that it's actually a thing for it. It's a Easter egg.
Oh, I get it. That one's the moon. That one's the
It's actually a sneak peek at the original map for Destiny 1.
fuck you, Marksman.
Like the map of all the planets, I mean. The map, the very bottom
Damn it, I should have had
the very bottom planet, which would have been Earth, had all the trees on it.
As soon as you did that.
And then there's also
Why is this shit?
because we're horrible.
son of a slut.
Game
Thank you.
over.
I found Stark. I let him.
We had a random person?
Thank God.
Huh.
You guys can start.
Remember, you gotta wiggle,
roasting
wiggle, wiggle the
up some
joysticks.
food in the cat's
Kyrie, get down now.
I'm wiggling.
Get down.
$7,000 performance.
8,000 for performance. I got a killing frenzy. Booyah.
I got 9 kills that game. Haha.
Oh, 2 games until I rank up and I have matched
It was like,
the Lord
I'm back
Almighty
in the for a sec.
Strongdoor.
I need to go pee. Pee break. And break.
Yeah, I'll take a piss break. I've been holding it for like 3 hours, so good shit.
I don't know, I'm gonna put this in here. Hotkeys.
Yo, what flavor juice do you have?
Peach guava.
We have peach mango.
What's up, bitches? Wow, no response. Rude.
So, who wants to go reach achievement hunting? Get all of the.
We could try, I don't know.
I showed it to her.
I don't even
I'd
know.
have to show her again.
Hey, has anyone? I'm just
Shit,
gonna Google
didn't
it.
mean to do that.
What's going on?
Death by Snoo Snoo? Is that what we're talking about?
Hold on, guys. I need to back out. I'm just backing
What
out
one?
temporarily so I can go get the achievement. If anyone wants to do it, you go to Custom Multiplayer, Halo CE. You choose a map. Hold on.
I don't know what achievement he's talking about.
I don't do. The mystery achievement. You go into startup. Well, don't start
Uh-huh.
custom game. Just go to the custom game menu,
Custom game.
and then change the game type name to .fortune.
Team name to dot fortune? What?
So
What do you change to dot fortune?
Where'd everybody go?
Halo CE.
Hey, what's up? What happened? Why'd you all leave?
I don't know.
Iron, what do you change? The game name to it?
How do you do it?
The game type.
No,
Okay.
the,
Game type name.
Um,
Mystery achievement. If that's unlocked.
Wait,
Oh,
what
you
is
just
it?
gotta make a game mode?
How do you
Yeah,
change the game type?
You right click click the right thumbstick in, and it should bring up a text box, and you type in.
oh, I think I already did this one.
FORTUNE.
Go to game type.
Sorry, this fortune is temporarily out of order.
And you put
Yeah, I've already done this one. I already did that.
Yep, there it is.
Wait, this dot what?
Fortune.
Fortune, like money.
TUNE.
Smile.
Okay, yeah, just send me an invite. I'm done. I already had that, I forgot.
Weird.
You just rename it.
So wait, you just
You don't
make
even
a
have to
game
enter
mode,
it.
that's
Yep, that's it.
Hey, there's a bunch of achievements for random shit. It's just Easter eggs from back in the day.
Give me 2 seconds. I'm making a game mode real quick.
Here, let's see.
I think I got all the ones that are the super easy ones. Let me go to the very bottom. Go from there, because easy
Custom
peasy.
map using Forge World. Created and saved 5 custom game types.
See, he is the game. Collection eligibility confirmed.
Hold on, I'm gonna go. Hold on, I'm gonna go.
Oh, okay. The very bottom achievement is the one where you see Halo, or you see the Master Chief as a Easter egg. Pretty sure. No, you just, the moment you hit save, it'll tell you a message and you'll get the achievement. You may have already had it.
Really?
You have to
gotten
name
this
it
achievement.
dot fortune
Do I have to
and
name
then
it?
hit enter.
Oh, I haven't done that. Okay, I'll do that here in a second.
When you guys were first saying it, I thought you guys were saying dot 4chan.
So,
No,
dot.
doesn't
Does
matter.
it have to be capital?
No.
No, period.
Dot fortune.
FOR. Yeah.
I know it's spell fortune. What's up, dog?
What is this?
Cool.
Okay. This is obtained towards the end of the game, the 11th pillar autumn.
My achievement didn't fucking pop. What the fuck?
Oh, okay, that's that. That one's easy.
Game master.
Exodus. Legendary in 3 hours. Create a custom map using Forge.
Hold on, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I already had it.
Have that achievement
If
that
it gives you a message, then
doesn't
you
pop.
already had it. I'm just gonna favorite some easy. Use a pelican turret. That one should be pretty easy.
Alright, done. That's 5 game modes. I'm pretty sure I had that though.
Alright, here's an invite back.
Also, it took me so long because my sister's picking me up some McDonald's. Now I
Get
really
that
don't have to
Beatus.
leave my room.
I'm in my
Get that
basement.
Beatus.
I took my pee and now I'm good for the next 6 hours. Let's go.
Yup. I got me some cheddar pretzels here.
I'm also snacking on some Pop-Tarts. I have a really high metabolism.
Same here.
I eat a shit ton, but I'm skinny as fuck.
Yep. Just waiting on Yo-Yo.
I'm coming. I'm coming.
We could always go and, I mean, if we had only 4 of us, we could do the lone wolf, try to get 1,500 or 150 million. Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm just.
150,000, not million.
150,000 shouldn't be that hard. There are spots in the map that you can hide and they can't touch you.
Wait, is it for what?
Lone wolf.
I don't know what Lone Wolf is.
All you have
The
to do is
last
put it on
mission.
normal or heroic.
Sorry. Oh shit.
One man, tap your controller.
Put it
I
on
accidentally opened up
easy mode,
Edge
it puts
somehow.
all the skulls on.
You'd be better off on normal or heroic. It'd still give you just as many
Villains.
points as skulls.
Something to do. I guess 19 people have the achievement for playing on the 14th of the month. Maybe a little more than that, but
Mm-hmm.
quiet, Kyrie. Hi, Kyrie. You got bubbles. I see.
Turn around.
Oh, you can get the achievement by just changing the date on the PC easily. Might do that one.
Huh?
Nope.
What, you can't wait for
Impatient.
10 days? 9 days?
You did get it.
Oh, you do?
I'm doing
Oh, yeah. Then after this game, I'm actually gonna do it. I'm gonna change my date on my computer quick.
God dang it.
Get it ready.
I mean, you can just do
No,
it on your
because
Xbox
I
and
can't be
then
online
get
if the date I can't change the time if I am not connected to Xbox Live.
Are you file sharing?
No, I can put the disc in, but the problem is that it's just annoying. I don't want to go through the hassle of having to turn the Xbox on, off, this, that, and the other thing. When all I gotta do is right click and change my time zone a couple hours.
Oh shit, that's Ladybird. I'm sorry. Tell Lady I said sorry. I wasn't trying to. I saw black and I didn't know.
So desu ka?
Said it's
Lost
okay.
the lead.
Does
No,
Lady
fuck
not
you.
have a headset, or is she just not going to the party?
No, she can hear us. Lady, I'm sorry. I didn't know. It was
Damn you.
Shit.
I thought it was like an iron. I said sorry. God damn it! I have like 6
I was
fucking
trying
people.
to assassinate Trog.
Damn it.
Somebody killed him before I could. You assholes.
Damn you, Legacy. Let
Hello.
me sip on my coffee in peace.
I tried to shoot you as I jumped off the edge.
Pretty fucking cool. I deserve that.
Fuck. Damn you, marksman.
I don't know how I survived marksman, but I'm gonna take it.
It's Bloom. It's Bloom.
Trog, you evil bastard.
Oh my god.
Damn you.
Like I'm
Let me
not gonna
sip my
notice
coffee
you.
in peace.
Motherfucker.
Damn it! was trying to get the assassination, but it just punched you out like a bitch instead. Just like, no, I want to stab him.
Damn you, Frog Boy. Behind you!
Hello.
Oh, my stomach.
No, fuck you, yo-yo!
Pop Tarts and root beer do not go well together.
Yeah, they do.
No. Brown sugar,
No, you gotta get fucking 99 root beer, add some vanilla ice cream to it. You know?
Damn you, Yo-Yo.
Dad's root beer is fucking number one. I don't even want to fucking. Don't even come at me.
No, I was just trying to find the one with the most alcohol count so that when you add the vanilla ice cream to it, it's, I don't know, more worth it.
I don't do.
Well, you
I don't
do
do
realize
alcohol.
that
Bad
Maybe
things
he should
happen
be
to
drinking so he stops killing me.
bad things.
You do realize that
I might start
ice cream,
drinking.
Damn it! I should have aimed.
vanilla ice cream and root beer are made
Should have aimed in.
right?
You know what? Average
Yo.
Giant, I fucking hate you.
So, lady, I've killed you so many times from your spawn. I'm so sorry.
I just didn't shoot her a few
We
times.
haven't seen Lady once this match yet.
I've killed her so many times. She keeps running into me. And
Hey, Trogdor, turn around. Trogdor, turn around.
They have the same colored fucking armor, and it scares the shit.
Aren't I the same color as the rest of them?
Did turn around. I'm the only white man here.
Damn it.
I mean,
Damn it, Juan. See, I didn't shoot at first because I thought it was fucking lady.
How did that not? Thank God.
I was just being a douche to Lady. She was shooting at me, and I was just walking closer to her while weaving in
Claire,
and
you
out
got
of her
so fucking
bullets.
lucky.
Oh no!
I was literally had one bar of health and I killed 3 people who all shot at me.
Yes.
What's the actual
Fuck you,
fuck on that
Wingman.
one?
What the
sorry, that
actual
was
fuck on
my
that
bad.
one? Just that one part.
Damn it.
Right? Not the
No,
others.
I literally spawn killed her. As soon as she popped back up, she was dead. I'm sorry.
I'm not.
Oh, I missed my
Fuck you, Giant.
assassination.
I heard this thing, like, is this somebody behind me?
Like, I went to melee you, and it went next to your head.
Right?
Okay.
Like, you almost got a second knife.
Okay, I'll be right back. Oh.
How do you like it, yo-yo? You be twerking for Daddy Trogdor. That's right, Daddy Trog every day. Daddy Trog every day. Give it to me, boy. Shake and bake, baby. Shake and bake.
Okay, just give me some seconds.
All hail the
Strongcore,
Brigadier
1,000
General.
years. 1,000 years Strongcore.
Come on, come
All
on.
hail the Brigadier General.
Hey, at least you're not a Brigadier General grade 4.
This is true. I wonder if that's in this. I wonder what's after Brigadier General. I really want to know now.
Well, they took out the grade systems because the grade systems were if you couldn't rank up fast enough.
Well, I need another 80,000 and then I'll be...
1 sec.
So, 8 more games, guys. Keep it going. Keep feeding me kills.
Oh, no, I backed out for a second. You guys are fine. Go
No, we're
do
not.
as much as you can quick.
He's doing...
Yeah,
He's doing
just,
something for an achievement. Just go. We'll get the achievement in like.
I'm gonna go for 2 achievements.
whenever the
Don't mind
fuck
me.
it is. Speaking of which, where is my phone? I had it and now it's gone. Oh,
Yo-Yo, are you
my-
playing on the PC and the Xbox right now? Because it shows your name in my friends list on the computer.
Damn it!
What happened?
Swoodity, swoodity.
I know. It said that somebody was idling and it backed me
Oh,
up.
there we go. Just got my attention. I just got remember reach.
Yes.
There we go. How far am I in this last
So
part
you
here?
just change your data on the PC and then start it up.
Started up. I just started up a mission. I just started up one of the final missions here. I'm gonna turn it off now.
Nice.
Let's save
You
and
go
quit.
for the 150,000 by yourself?
No, no, no. I'm not gonna do that right now.
No.
I mean, I could. Could turn on mod support and just use cheat engine to give me unlimited health. Just fucking go in.
Hold on, is the 150,000?
I don't
like,
think
the
you
score have
can
to get on a
unlock
mission?
achievements on the anti-cheat disabled.
It's fine. I'll figure it out. I just need. Okay, it displays prominently what the anti-cheat program is. I mean, it's easy to bypass when you know what it is, so don't worry about it.
Frogdor, I hope you know I'm coming for your ass this entire game.
Set
Why?
those.
What the fuck did I do?
This is gonna be payback for all the previous games.
Considering I just got spot killed.
I've recruited some help too.
Damn it. Who shot
Also,
me?
I kind of hate this map for
Ooh,
SWAT.
I've reached
This
elevator.
map, I love this map on Slayer.
No, fuck you. Fuck you.
Ah, shit, no, no. Senpai, no.
Ayos míos!
Now that's a value meal. Oh.
I legitimately let Lady try to kill me.
Bullshit, yo. You did not let me kill you.
Da, da,
No,
da,
no,
da,
no,
da,
I let
da.
Lady try to kill me.
Oh.
Motherfucker.
There we go. Let's check this out.
It's not a game until you're able to assassinate people.
Oh shit. I just got Lady Bird. Sorry, lady.
Ah! I just got killed by bread.
Oh, bread and bread.
Let's make this bread, bitches.
No.
Shit.
Okay.
In SWAT, are you able to kill people with body shots? Because it does damage
Yeah.
you.
It does damage, it just doesn't, like...
Takes as long. It takes longer.
Oh yeah, the
Fucking A.
Okay.
Wait, did I... Okay, I did kill him. It just didn't tell me I killed him. That was weird.
No.
party with DJ Brute.
It's been doing that for me almost every game, and it turns out that I didn't get the kill. Somebody else did.
Damn it, Breaded. Go fuck yourself.
No!
Assassination!
I love you for assassinating that bastard. But, you need to die for me.
I saw
Die for the
that.
cause.
He was there, and he's just like, "Damn you, Brett." And I'm just
Fuck,
like, "Wait,
yo.
where is he?" I saw Lady once, but I don't know.
I
I see her, and then she disappears.
Let's close that. Call it good.
Motherfucker, dude. Fuck this. Stupid. I can't kill any of the randoms apparently because I'm fucking trash.
I'm going to keep assassinating Brett until he leaves.
Please do.
That's my plan.
Because I fucking hate bread.
I mean, I love bread. Bread's a very good thing to eat. Very healthy for you. Fuck you, Marksman.
Damn it, he turned around at the last second. I almost got headshot.
This place looks way too nice to be in a war zone.
Well, I mean, there was a lot more things on fire in the campaign, I think.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah!
I fucking hate you, Yo-Yo.
No, you don't. You love me.
Shit! Damn you, Trug!
Okay, man,
Bye.
yes, I do love you, but I hate you right now.
Dude, this headshot 1600 dude is just a camping cock.
That's why I've been trying to assassinate the... What? That was a headshot. Shit nuggets.
I thought I was on the lift, so I was trying to back up, and it didn't work.
Are you sure body shots work?
Yeah, you just gotta get a lot of them.
Fuck you, yo.
I love you.
I was just sitting in the back of the map, just looking at the top mid, like, okay, y'all are just gonna keep rushing it, so.
Fuck you, Giant. I knew you were shooting me.
I finally killed Bread. I'm so proud of myself.
Please don't hurt me so
Lord
bad.
is my witness. One day I will find a usable spleen.
God damn it, Yo-Yo.
I love you.
Do you though? Fucking Bread.
I was trying to go for headshot, dude. Come on. Hey Trogdor,
Dude, I'm
I
doing
will stop
pistols
going after
only.
you if I can employ you to go after Yo-Yo for me.
Nah, I just go for whoever. I don't really care. If we weren't playing SWAT, yes, but you guys keep making me play SWAT, which is a terrible game mode. To play it back to back to back to back to back to back to back.
I mean, I'm kind of on board with that notion. Back to back is a bit much.
Yo-Yo, I'm gonna hurt you so hard.
Just give me something else. Something
Oh
that
man, Ladybird got me.
actually is fun.
I couldn't figure out which direction I was being shot from, and then it turns out Lady shot me
Oh,
from behind.
Lady killed me! Yay! If you teabag me, okay, she didn't teabag me.
No, that's just you, man. My type of disrespect is when I assassinate you. That's just disrespectful.
No!
Why doesn't it ever go yay when I shoot people? It upsets me.
Wow. Ladybird J is beating me right now.
It's finally
Whoa.
fucking over. Fuck this
Lady
stupid
went
shit.
from no points to 5 points in like seconds.
Good.
Holy hell.
She did better than player. That's not saying much.
Fuck you too, Trogdor.
Get
Dude,
burnt
Battle
on.
Hardened win 250 multiplayer games.
Can we please play something else? Thank God.
Yes!
I
Brigadier
honestly
General!
don't care what we play at this moment. We can keep playing free for all, just please not SWAT. Just please not SWAT. That's all I ask.
So I gotta start up SWAT again.
Your boy's a Brigadier General!
Alright, one man, you ready?
Yeah,
Halfway through, Brigadier General.
Just waiting for an invite.
Do we
Oh,
not
I
like
got
big
you.
teams?
No.
Hey Kyrie, come back
Got
here.
him already.
Keep this up and I'm gonna break your Nico.
You want a new diver?
Nico, Nico,
Okay, so we can go either big team or we can go
Come here.
we can save a free for all and do something else.
Actually, hold on. No. Let's keep playing SWAT because I'm really close to unlocking an achievement.
What achievement?
Aim for the head.
Fine. How close
Okay,
are
so-
you? How many headshots do you need? It should say.
97%. Hold on. Let me see. Let me check the in-game achievement thing. Aim for the head. I need 62 more headshots.
Okay, no, we're not gonna keep playing this then.
Why? I average 20 kills a game.
That's 3 games. I'm okay with doing. I'll do 4 more games of SWAT, and then no more
Okay.
SWAT for a little bit.
Mark,
seriously.
Lady J
Like
can
seriously, SWAT or snipers are off the table after these 4 games. Because ugh.
Big team
Play SWAT.
snipers?
No. I Trogdor will leave if we do snipers.
If you do
big
snipers,
team
Trog and I
Slayer.
will go do firefight.
Or fucking the campaign.
Hello, new streamer. We'll be back in the game in a second here.
What campaign mission?
Can we do that? We can't do that with 7 people though.
Nope. That's what I'm saying. Don't fucking
we
do
can
snipers
split up
then.
into 2 squads.
Be about 1 minute.
I'm
Well,
not
we
doing the campaign because I'm trying to get armor so I can look sexy in the campaign.
I haven't
Okay,
done
well,
any
I can't
campaign
do anything
yet,
until
so.
one man and Ladybird hits their controller, so.
I think they're dealing with their little. I think they're dealing with their little one. Oh, never mind.
We'll get their whoever needs that achievement, and then we'll figure something else out to do.
Just anything. I'm just so tired of the headshots. I
Here,
wanna
how
play
about
something where I
this?
can.
How about this, guys? Let's make it easy. Why doesn't everyone just run into the middle of the map? Yeah,
I want to kill
everyone
shit
run
too.
into the middle of the map.
Who has the baby?
Let's be a baby.
Okay.
SWAT.
I remember when my brothers and sisters were like 2 years old. That was a lot of fun. Good times.
Lost the lead.
Fuck, damn it. Marksman, I'm supposed to be getting the achievement. Alright, hey, everybody meet me at the, what is this place? The northwestern corner of the map.
I would if Trog would stop shooting me in the head.
Who's trying to get him?
Yo-yo, I'm sitting here teabagging in the corner of the map. Don't, alright, sweet. There's one.
See, I was nice.
Oh.
I didn't fucking kill you.
Damn it, Marksman.
Legacy, other side.
You do? Alright, I'm kicking ass then.
No, I'm just trying to get it as soon as possible. That way we can get it done with. Hey! Oh, god damn it.
Giant, I swear to God, I'm going to skull fuck you. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but it's coming, and I will fuck you. Hard. So get ready.
No, don't
Very
run!
Uranus.
Wow, he just knocked that from you.
I'm coming to skull fuck you. Player, get the fuck away, I'm teabagging!
You Jojo.
I'm a fucking... Player, you're next. I'm coming for you, nigga.
Alexander.
Damn it! Guys, I'm never gonna get the achievement at this rate.
Double
Like,
kill.
it's gonna take more than 4 games.
I'm trying to figure out where
There you
everybody
go.
is, but everybody's just shooting.
Let's go for a normal game.
Fuck. Oh, there's Yo-Yo.
Revenge.
Oh,
Tied the leader.
people at once.
Lost
God
the
damn it.
lead. Double
Damn.
kill. Tied the leader. Lost the lead.
Fuck.
Oh, shit.
I'm trying to find Yo-Yo, but every time I spawn, there's somebody waiting for me. Who's that? Yo-Yo, behind you. I'm coming.
There we go. Let's get this shit done.
I am fresh out of mercy.
Sorry, daughter's been screaming a little bit. She's
Yo-Yo,
a little tired, so.
Let me know when you're behind me so I can let you kill me.
Sorry, I wanted to make it more challenging for you.
I'm the only white guy, so it should be pretty easy.
Love you.
Oh, I missed. I missed the
Trog
Hey,
just,
okay, I'll get you some in a
as bad
second.
as he doesn't want me to assassinate him again.
I want to go this way.
Gargor, I'm here.
Don't worry,
Hey.
lady. Trog killed me immediately after.
No,
Yep.
you're fine. I
I'm gonna keep killing you.
don't get ass hurt over getting. It's whatever.
I don't get ass hurt
My
either.
god, my stream is probably going like, oh my god, there's a girl in the game? What the hell? Girls play Halo still?
Damn it. That didn't work.
Sorry, lady, I love you.
What are you saying before you did?
He's a bitch. That's what we call him.
Ugh.
Anyways,
I'm a
but he
bitch.
asked me to start playing Halo with him, and we played through all of the Halo games in what, 2 weeks?
Double kill.
Damn it, Legacy. I thought you were Yo.
Tied
That's why I
the
didn't
leader.
fucking shoot.
Ah! Okay.
You two have the same colored armor.
Lost the lead.
Dang it, Marksman. I was going to assassinate her when my
Yeah,
sprint came
we
back.
were doing guaranteed die right there 'cause we had 3 people all over there.
Revenge. Tied the leader.
Liberating. Thank you.
Triple kill. Gain the lead.
I was
Overkill.
gonna assassinate Trog, but he got
Killing
too
spree.
far away, so I just shot him in the back of the head.
Shit, damn it. At least an overkill.
Fuck you! Where's Yo-Yo?
Yo,
Oh, it's Yo.
Lost the lead.
Damn it.
Where's Yo-Yo?
Missed.
Yo-Yo, where are you?
Every time I see Trogdor's back, he's dead.
Look at that. You already got 20, Yo-Yo.
It's Trog.
I'm gonna be at the top of the map.
Oh shit, that was Yo-Yo. My bad. I thought it was Legacy.
A random person was AFK. Oh god!
Damn it, Marksman. Marksman, you keep killing me.
Twerk it for me, baby. Twerk it. Twerk it. Fuck yeah.
But our random person was AFK, so I lined it up behind him and just fucking.
Oh, that was Yo-Yo. Okay.
See,
See, there you go. And that was more fun than just...
Trogdor, no! Trogdor, I was literally chasing. I was like 2 steps
You have three
behind
more.
you.
You have 3 more games of SWAT to get it.
No, actually, I would just need 2 more. If I win the next one, all I need is 12 more
You needed
kills after
62.
that.
What's the achievement called?
25 if you won.
Like 2,500 headshots. It's not.
What's the achievement called? I think
Is it player headshots?
I probably
Yeah, it's player.
already have it.
I already have it too.
Yeah,
Yep, 25 headshots that game.
because you can...
I had to
That
make
just
sure every
intimidates me.
single kill was a headshot.
The only thing I need from like PvP,
2,500
I need
headshots.
I need 2,500 assist medals. I need that shit.
I probably have that one already. If
Yeah,
I'm being
I don't
Yeah,
get
honestly,
it.
Honestly,
on
I
Forza
really
Master
think the
too.
easiest way to do that, and also we could boost the hell out of each other, is just have someone shoot someone once and then you come behind them and assassinate them.
It doesn't count if you break the shield. You have to do damage to their health to get the assist.
Ah.
Yeah, it's dumb.
So
Also-
a melee and a shot in the foot, and then have the other person assassinate them.
Crazy little drunk.
I can't even tell. There's so many goddamn achievements, I can't find the one I'm looking for. Nothing's progressing very fast, so I'm pretty sure I already have it.
I'm almost at 600 achievements, so.
Yeah, I'm only at like 200 something, but
Honestly,
I got
if
most
we
of them
did
all
get
in
one
a
more
month.
person in here, we could all just boost.
Yeah, nah.
SWAT.
I'm
I
okay.
mean, I would totally do it, but that's just a
Boosting really isn't worth it in this version.
Oh, damn it.
In the old
You're
version,
always
yes.
over there, and you spawn there. It's like your favorite spot.
Lost the
It
lead.
is.
I fucking hate you, Marksman. Just shoot through a fucking window.
Oh, we've played on this map already.
Yeah.
God damn you, player.
Damn.
I'm trying to line up those minty shots.
That's all I do.
Just imagine if you can get collats and frickin' SWAT.
Kill Joe. Double kill.
I just spawned here. My bad.
They make it work for it.
Motherfucker.
Oh, sorry, Ladybird. Oh, where am I going here?
No!
Dang it, I missed my opportunity.
Killing spree. Tied the lead.
Damn it.
Lost
Missing
the
so
lead.
much on that random.
You were so far away from me, my reticle didn't even turn red.
Hey,
Marksman,
why is it
mean-
when I shoot people
Marksman,
in the head,
why
I
do
don't
we
get
keep
a
running
front
into
end?
each other, Marksman? Why?
I don't know. Oh, damn it, that was Yo-Yo. Shit.
It's
I was trying
okay.
to find him.
Keep thinking I'm gonna
Trogdor,
run
you
into
were
Marksman.
so
though.
lucky you turned back at the last second.
Damn it.
Uh-huh.
Legacy, it's me!
I was
Let me
coming
shoot
for
you!
your ass.
I'm guessing that was You mean... What? Huh? I got stabbed in the back by iron again. Makes sense.
Are you fucking kidding
I
me?
jumped
I
into
shot
that.
you legit in the head 4 different times, Marksman. You got so lucky.
Who's that? Lucky player!
I haven't seen iron once this game.
I've killed Iron like 10 times
Kill
already.
joy.
That wasn't even a
People
headshot.
actually assassinated Legacy.
I'm trying to start a new tradition
Another
with
assassination.
assassinating Trogdor.
I like
Damn.
to stab people.
Tragdor.
What?
Nothing.
Hello, Diesel.
You just killed me.
Yeah,
Alright.
it's a hobby.
I can tell.
There's Trogdor. Trogdor's
I just
dead.
assassinated the random a second time. How many times do you think I can assassinate him before he leaves?
Double kill.
I fucking saw you, player. Plus, I heard you.
I killed Tragdor.
I knew you heard me coming up. It's
Yo,
like
yo,
Grit ran
coming out across the
right
bridge.
before I got to you.
I love you, Giant.
Yeah.
I love how I just sprint at you in a
Double
straight
kill.
line. Like, love me!
Killing
Hey,
spree.
everyone, come to the front of the map for hugs.
I want a hug!
Damn it, Yo-Yo.
Special yo-yo hugs for a distance, where Legacy just died. Come to the front of the
I want
map.
to be forever alone.
Hi, lady, I love you. I
Thank you, Iron.
understand.
Now I can hunt. There's Trogdor.
What? Oh,
Love
shit.
you.
I'm only looking for
Oh,
Trogdor right
that's
now.
where you are. Okay.
My balloon won't hit you at all.
Come get me.
What the hell, game? Am I lagging? Oh, yeah, I'm lagging. Okay, that's why.
Love you, Giant. Alright, now I
Nice
only
try,
need
marksman.
12 more kills.
Wowza.
Alright.
I'll be
You guys
honest,
gonna do
I-
one or two games
it's-
without me because I have to go up and eat.
Gotta go and
I
do
never
some drugs.
turned down good home cooked food, so.
Home cooked drugs. Maybe a little
Yep,
bathroom
Gary,
brew.
and I need my daily meth intake.
But I'm gonna
Some
pause my
bathtub
stream.
beer. Oh, bathtub.
Meth me.
And
Dude,
Trogdor,
meth me up. What?
you are now leader.
Oh, cool.
It's all fancy.
I'm gonna back out
I'm gonna
for a sec.
fuck with you all, just so you know.
Do
Oh
it.
wait,
Do
wrong
it for
thing,
me,
wrong thing, wrong
Trogdor.
thing.
Do it for me.
Okay.
Hold back.
I chose the wrong.
Do it
Hey,
for
I
the
have
bit.
12 views.
Do it for
Do you guys like my you guys like my banner?
God damn
Is my
it.
banner cool?
Which banner?
The one no one has.
I mean, I'll get it here in a little bit.
How'd you get that?
You can play on the 14th. You just change your date, but it's hard to do on Xbox. He did it on PC.
I just did it. I did it in between the games. The other game.
Alright, 12 kills. I can do this.
The big bork is borking.
The Borkosaurus Rex. Tragdor. The Borkosaurus Rex.
Sir Borkington the Third. I told told my family that I'm just gonna name our dog Sir Borkington, so eventually I can have Sir Borkington the Third.
Someone quit. They saw us and they were like, fuck.
Okay. I'm probably gonna end my stream
Sir
soon, and then I'm
Borksaw.
gonna drop off my daughter. And then either I'm gonna just come home and play again, or I'm gonna go to work and play again. You know, either way I'm playing, so it's fine.
First strike. Gain the lead.
Wait, where do you work that lets you play games?
In
Lost the lead.
I'm NASA. It's okay.
Not gonna lie, Legacy, you should have had.
I did have you. I killed you.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, we both killed each other.
But
No, you didn't. I'm still alive.
Wait, what? I shot marksman the moment I died. I didn't. Well, I was nowhere near you. I don't know what.
Tied the leader.
Legacy, no. No.
Kill them. Kill them all, guys. Especially the red ones
Lost the lead.
that start with a yo.
I'm not. Well, I technically am red. I'm white and red.
Black and yellow. It's okay.
Haven't been assassinated by Giant.
Yeah.
Yet. Really getting disappointed in him.
I'm doing things.
Iron Giant's not in game chat right now. No, he's not. Wait, it was showing up in. Were you messaging in game chat?
Somebody did a face in there, so I did a face back. Just like, oh, whoa. The little
Find the
face.
leader.
You know, I actually haven't seen many people.
Oh shit, I almost spawn killed Ladybird. I had just killed her and then I walked around a corner and I saw her running. How you doing?
Tie the leader.
Oh, fuck. I gotta move closer.
Damn it. Were you pre-firing Iron?
Right in the dome.
Yo, get out of the corner.
Like get domed.
Gain the lead.
This is his rock. He named it Steve.
Double kill.
Damn it. I thought that was you that I killed, but it was the other guy.
I'm trying to fucking do something and I fucking keep running into Giant. Hello.
Fuck. Actually, no, Yo-Yo got me, so I'm not upset about that.
I just want
Pistols
this
for
over.
the win. Just because Trog said he was upset that I didn't assassinate him, I've been trying to find him so I can stab him.
You're the one that went AFK and I'm the one that died.
Ooh, he's getting salty.
Fuck.
Lost
I
the
thought I
lead.
saw someone over there.
You can't find me, Giant. You're trash. You're not good at assassinating.
I just need one more.
Hey, Ladybird,
Marksman,
do me
you
a
were my
favor.
500 touchdown. Alright, yeah.
Trog,
keep
Ladybird
it
just
pop.
learned your pain of assassination. Oh
Hi.
shit!
How you doing? How you doing?
Hey, Sebastian.
Bitch now. Hi, how are you?
I will pay anybody in this party right now who's in that game $1 on Venmo.
Damn it! I was about to
You
get
all
Marksman.
just
I got
turn
Iron
around
Giant
and
back-to-back assassinations. That's how it's done.
Revenge.
I was trying to get Marksman. You
I don't
know.
give a fuck who you get. I'm getting you.
I feel like I need an adult.
I am an adult.
I need a bigger adult.
I'm here.
Big as you
What do
get,
you
baby
need?
girl.
Fuck.
Did somebody call an adult?
You just keep.
Damn it! You turned around.
Is that the best? Around, ain't no good here to keep you. That thing is a guy?
You're the best.
Fucking Esser. Somebody kill him.
Wow, Essex is really good.
Ah, dang it! I thought that was someone else. I'm sorry, lady. I thought
It's
you were
fine.
someone else.
She's gonna
I
flip
walk
you the
in. I walk
ladybird.
into the reasons I die, so it's fine.
She's gonna flip you the ladybird.
He's like the coolest girl who doesn't care about getting shot on players who do.
I was gonna say, what are you talking about?
I accepted that.
I mean, I think most girls would care about being shit on by a dude. I mean, come on.
I mean, if she doesn't go all like raging at her.
Behind you.
Rage quit.
Behind you.
Dang you, Trog.
I just have to keep killing
Monster
Giant.
dog.
Giant, you're my bitch this game. I need you to get that through your head.
I mean, you already shoved your knife through my head, so.
Twice.
God damn it.
Shit, I get Esser. Kyrie likes pizza? Well, mommy took the pizza and didn't let you have none no more. Yep, you can blame mommy. When you go to mommy's house, you tell her, bad mommy, give me pizza.
Where's my pizza, damn it?
I bought
Pancakes now, woman.
I bought a breakfast pizza this morning, and Kyrie's mother, my daughter's mother, took it. And so Kyrie didn't get any of the breakfast pizza that was a little bit for her, a little bit for me.
Yeah, Yeah, it is
kill
your
each other at the
pizza.
same
You
time.
should go smack mommy. Just kidding.
Well, she also has it in her head that her biological mother is Big Mommy, and Daddy's new girlfriend is the hot one. I never said anything like that. She just does, and I don't know where she got it.
You called your girlfriend the hot mommy and her actual mother
Yeah,
Big
because her
Mommy?
actual mommy's a little bigger.
Game over.
Yeah, I win. Fuck you.
It's not very nice, but she does it.
Just charge in for one final
The
punch
fact that
as an
she knows
insult.
that
Just
difference.
What insult? I assassinated you twice. I took your profession and made it my own. I
it's
threw
not
it
a
in your
profession. I
face.
just like being a dick.
Oh yeah, you want your pizza back?
Oh,
Okay.
that guy.
Let me take you home so you can get your pizza back.
I mean, pizza's dope. Oh,